Hello, and welcome to the online ISP forum for June 13th, 2013. Today's topic is Tips for Trainers, Building Capacity to Teach the ISP Process. My name is Dan McCloy. I'm part of the team that provides supports throughout Oregon on person-centered practices and the 24-hour comprehensive ISP planning process. We're glad you're able to join us today. This webinar is being brought to you by Oregon Technical Assistance Corporation. OTAC has been providing training and technical assistance to professionals and citizens concerned about intellectual and developmental disabilities since 1984. OTAC is available to answer 24-hour comprehensive ISP process questions. If you have any questions or comments after today's forum, you can reach us at www.otac.org/ISP/support or at 503-428-5435. Participants in today's forum can submit questions through the chat box on the webinar console anytime during the presentation. We hope to have time for a short question and answer session at the end of the presentation. This webinar is being recorded to share with others who weren't able to attend live today. Your telephones and microphones have been muted for this call. The recording of today's forum will be posted later today on the OTAC website. With us today are CJ Webb and Sherry Stephen from the Individual Support Planning Team here at OTAC. CJ Webb has provided services to people with disabilities for over 20 years. She is a certified facilitator of person-centered plans, assisting teams with developing plans and supporting outcomes. Sherry Stephen has worked in various capacities for organizations in Oregon before joining us at OTAC in 2007. She provides training on the 24-hour comprehensive ISP process as well as person-centered thinking. They are delighted to talk to you today about the tips to train others. So I want to thank you again for being with us, and I'm going to turn it over to CJ and Sherry.
Good morning, everybody. The first thing I want to talk about are some of the things that you are going to walk away with today. And I really hope that you are going to understand with the effects of learning. We're going to talk about some basic components of training and give examples that you can use in your day-to-day training, as well as other resources that you're going to be able to use. The first thing I want to find out today is how many other people here have done training with others. So there's a poll question that's going to ask how often you do training, whether it be the ISP process or any other topic. So how often do you do training? Is it 1 or 2 times a month, every 4 to 8 weeks, 2 to 3 times a year, 1 time or less? I'll give you a second to answer that.
So we have, it looks about 68% have voted CJ.
Okay. And of that, can we show everyone the poll? Who do we have here today?
Well, it looks like 53% voted for very often. Somewhat often, 13%. Not very often is also 13%. Tied with none of the above, 13%. And very infrequently is 7%. So the majority train very often.
Great. And hopefully what we're going to be able to do today is really build on what you know. And the people who have never done training before, this will be extremely helpful to give you those tips to be able to do effective training about the ISP process as well as any other training. Because the ISP process is probably just one of the things that people are training about. So some of the things to think about when you're training are that people have different learning styles, and also that the brain and how people learn is really some important information. I'm going to touch base on that just briefly. And also that everyone is something to think about is everyone is smart, and figuring out those learning styles and how people learn is going to be really helpful to make sure that people can be at their best when they are learning. So some of people have heard that there's those basic learning styles: auditory, visual, kinesthetic, and tactile learners, but there's a lot of other different styles. So some of the first things that you can do are really thinking about those ways that you learn as the trainer, as well as how your trainees learn. And one of the big things to always remember is you kind of typically fall back on your primary learning style. So it's really important that you take into account the other learning styles and possibly get some help to do that. So one of the things is to think about taking into account maybe using other people as well as using different styles throughout your training, which we're going to talk about. So I put up an example that probably some people might not have heard of. There's tons of research on different learning styles. So David Kolb has a model that's based on experimental learning theory, and you can read a lot about all of these. There's so much information about learning styles out there, and also learning cycles, and how learning changes over time as well. So some people you'll probably know if you've been training for a while, which some of you have, the style that you felt most comfortable when you first did has changed over time. So people do grow and change and modify how best they do learn. There's other models that are about thinking and analyzing, the doers and the watchers. And it doesn't also mean that you're one style. So often with learning styles, you might be a little bit of both, or depends on the situation that you're learning in. So really thinking about all of these different types of learning styles is going to be really helpful to making your training more effective. One of the things is brain-based learning theory. It really stems from that piece that your brain and how you process the information, and knowing more about brain-based learning will really help to make someone really be effective with learning. So some of the key pieces with brain-based learning is the amount of sleep someone gets. When somebody works the night shift, they really will struggle at the end of that shift to be able to learn something. The foods you eat, people talk about those different foods and those things that make you feel really good and those foods that make you feel really tired. So some of the things when you're training is helping people have some of those foods that might be helpful. So sometimes it's the proteins, because if you have only things like donuts, that sugar might initially help, but in the long run might make people fall asleep later on. The drugs people take, and talking prescription drugs, and this is something that you can't control, but it's something to take into account, that if somebody maybe is needing to have some more time in the morning to wake up, that may be waiting later in the day to do training. This might be really helpful when you are doing more one-on-one training, and then you might be able to have those conversations. Everyone doesn't share that information. The other is having an environment that people feel that they can participate in. So having something that's welcoming and that's going to make people feel that they can contribute and participate in the training. So really taking all of these things into account are going to be extremely helpful to the learner to make sure that they're learning at their best. The other thing is everyone is gifted in their own ways, and we do a half-day session that talks a lot about the ways that people are smart. I'm not going to go into all of those because, as I said, it is a half-day session on that. But always remembering that sometimes if somebody hasn't gotten some information and you've tried it in a particular way, to try it in another way. Making sure that you're using different approaches with a person who might not get it, because it may be that they have music playing while they're learning to be able to absorb that information. Another really a good piece with learning is to have good expectations, to have that expectation that your staff are going to be able to acquire this information. And a lot of times when that expectation is risen, people do rise to that expectation. You don't want it to be unattainable, but again, keeping that expectation higher, and that will lead to people performing better. And it is keeping in mind that everyone does learn differently, and you may need to try other methods to be able to have that person rise to that occasion. So many of you have probably seen this ISP process overview graphic, and this can be one great tool to use when you are training the ISP process, as well as thinking about how you're going to break the training down, because many of you might have already been to a two-day class. There's a lot of information that we go over. We go over a lot of the details that you need to teach someone the ISP process. And this graphic can really be helpful to take pieces of the process and be able to focus on what you need with the training. So one of those key pieces within that process is you really need to be knowledgeable about the information, no matter what training you're doing. So for the ISP process, there's the ISP manual. And using that and making sure that if you are training the process, that you've gone through the manual, highlighted those areas for other people to really focus on particular pieces. There are certain things about the PFW when changes are made and how those are made. And a brand new manager may not know that you can write anywhere on that PFW as long as you sign and date it. So highlighting that information may be extremely helpful. There's also samples that we have on the ISP, on the OTAC website. And there's other information on the internet. So any information that you want to find, like those learning styles on brain-based learning, to do some research to really help yourself be that better trainer. And it's going to be helpful too, because the next point is being prepared. So you want to make sure you've got enough information, and also that you come early to the training and have the correct materials for the pieces that you're going to train. So one of the pieces is, this is a snapshot from our website that shows, and we have ISP training resources, and this is just the top third of the page. We have so many pieces that are in there, and they are graphics, there's reading information, we have videos to help any of you understand the ISP process, and also to use as those training resources so that you can also be able to give the information and have it from somebody else as well, because that is very helpful in training, to have a variety of different pieces. There's also the monthly online forums that we've done, just like this one. All of the past ones from 2012 to today are online, and you see the slideshow as well as hear the recording. So you can bring yourself up to speed, or it also can be that tool that you use with staff to really help them understand those pieces within the process, because some of those are the things that are probably the hardest to teach, although those little gray areas within the process. So this can be extremely helpful. The other thing to think about is how much time you have to train. So that graphic that was shown earlier, you may only have an hour to 2 hours at a time to train. So what is it that you want to train at during that time, and making sure that that information is quality rather than trying to fit the entire ISP process training in 2 hours, which will be really hard. So really looking at that and breaking up the training as needed to be able to be most effective and help the learner be able to absorb the information that they need. When you're thinking about training, how are you doing that training? In small groups, one-on-one, larger groups? That can be really helpful, because sometimes one-on-one you're going to be able to get to all of those really detailed questions in a larger group, sometimes you might not. So you may need a follow-up session with people to be able to be helpful. Another piece with effective learning is that you have a welcoming, inviting environment. And so many times, even if you're in your same organization, introductions are important. Who are people? Where do they work? And sometimes using an icebreaker can be really helpful to get people talking. When people are talking at the very beginning of any training, they're more likely to contribute throughout. And as a trainer, you want people to be asking questions, contributing their examples, and also sometimes maybe challenging what you said so there can be some rich discussion going on. And icebreakers could be simple things of, as we call at OTAC, an opening round, where you say one positive thing that's happened during the week. That could be something. There's other icebreakers. People have said, you know, what's your very first car? Something that's a positive way to get people engaged and really feeling part of the training. The components of all trainings. There's one big piece that when you're thinking of training, no matter whether it's one person or a ballroom full of people, there are really the top 10 components that you really need to take into account. And when those things happen, the learning is a lot more effective and people walk away with that information. So Sherry is going to give you the top 10 components to remember when training.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy you were able to join us today. This is actually my favorite part because I think these top 10 topics were the thing that helped me get motivated in improving my training and my techniques. So let's talk about number 10. Number 10 is about making training fun. Anyone that enjoys having fun in a class will definitely appreciate and be able to learn in an atmosphere where relaxation and fun is present. Training that is engaging and fun can even get people to forget that they're even training. Instead, feel like they're socializing and enjoying themselves while there. You can do all sorts of things such as games, puzzles, easy quizzes, and maybe even add a little bit of competition in with things to stir things up. That gets people relaxed and feels comfortable with engaging and, meeting new people. Number 9 is knowing that adult learners can only keep their attention at lectures for no more than 20 minutes at a time. So mixing things up, even having some simple verbal quizzes, ensuring information is being absorbed with the ability to talk back and forth in between those 20-minute lectures. Make sure that they're absorbing it. Just those small breaks can make a huge difference. Presentation should include periodic activities of 10 minutes or more to enable learners to become re-energized for the next time the verbal presentation or for the next lecture. So number 8, thinking about if someone has worked the night shift. This is one of the most difficult things, and it actually happens quite often. When getting off the shift, having a training can be very, very difficult for the person to absorb or retain information. You want to try to figure out the best time to do the training. When someone is on the night shift, are they really truly at their best? This will save you time in the long run. Having the proper rest is very important to productive learning and making sure that people are prepared and ready to be able to absorb the information. Now, number 7, the more we hear it, the more we remember it. We have to remember that, you know, when we do have the opportunity to restate information, we want to make sure that we're having that opportunity to repeat and repeat and repeat. Now, thinking about repeating information, it's not just about saying it over and over again. We want to think about the different ways that we can present the information so that they're getting that opportunity as different ways of learning that people have. Researchers show the range of number of times to hear something can vary in order to actually absorb it and get the information and be able to use it. Prevent information also in small pieces, maybe even over period, different days. Repeat it at the end of previous day's training. You want to the next day begin the new day, just kind of retouching on some of the things that are on the training the day before. When training the ISP process, you can think about different areas. You can have a classroom, you can have that one-on-one like CJ was talking about earlier. You can have a staff meeting, you could have a group meeting with all different people from different locations within your organization, all these different ways that we can think about not only different times, different ways, but also in different environments. You may want to think about other places that are not that typical training room. Maybe you usually have the meetings or the trainings in the group homes at the kitchen table. So just to stir things up, you may want to think about having a meeting at the main office in a classroom setting. These are all things that kind of stir things up a little bit and re-energize people. The next one is thinking about all the different approaches, the multiple approaches that is important to being able to offer your information. Repeating yourself is always is a way to drive the information into the memory of those of the class, such as thinking about telling them what you're going to say, thinking about what it is that that you actually say to them, and then you want to tell them what you said. So it's kind of like a three-part piece to better prepare those to be able to absorb that information. And then using examples is a good way to making sure that those that are in the class are getting what it is that you want them to get from that class. This brings us to number 6. There are so many different ways to provide information using visuals. Here's a list of different visuals. Graphics can be either on the wall in a PowerPoint, and when in a PowerPoint, it can be helpful for people who need to read information or take notes. There are all types of different graphics and plenty of places to get them. My favorite type of graphic is those that provide a little humor. This makes the class more relaxed and engaged. Short videos can be very powerful in showing live scenarios or specific things that you really want to hit home. Studies show when information is provided orally only, we recall approximately 10% of that information. By simply adding visuals, we can increase the retention rate by up to 65%. Or maybe studies show when information is provided visually, it increases the retention rate by over 50% rather than just by oral information. Humor, humor, humor. It's a very good way of not only getting your message across, but it also makes it fun and allows people to be relaxed. Okay, number 5. This provides you with a list to have at your training. When you, a list of things to have at your training, when there are things such as puzzles, activities, maybe even things to do at their table, such as pencils or, you know, one of the things that I've always encouraged is someone who does knitting, and that is one of their ways of learning. Knitting inside of a class can be very, very helpful for someone to be able to pay attention and absorb the information. Just remember there are plenty of places you can go on the web to create different puzzles and games that we can be that can be based on the information that you are offering. Some people don't even know that they are learning because the puzzles and games can be so much fun. And it's actually very simple. Once you go to the website, all you need to know is the questions and the answers. You plug that information in and it creates the puzzles for you. It's really a neat thing to use in training. Number 4, making the training relevant. This is huge. When things are relevant to what you know or what you do or what your work is, it creates you know, that attention. People are engaged. For example, with the direct support staff and their role within the ISP would be more focused on the PFW or the personal focus worksheet. But when you're training managers, it would include the whole piece, the whole, all the pieces within the process. Use examples that are relevant to their job. Ask others if you are newer to, you know, ask if you are newer to the position or organization. If you work with children, you may want to use examples with children, you know, ISPs, you know, set up PFWs, agendas, or action plans. So this creates what we call the buy-in. If it is relevant to their work, the class can stay more focused. All right, let's talk about comfortable environment. This comes in at number 3. There's different ways you can ask questions in a class. There is writing questions on a large piece of paper on the wall and allows the class to, you know, this is where you want the class to go in and be able to record information or answers on the wall. This helps people that have a difficult time talking in front of the group feel more comfortable in contributing. So in this way, they're not required to speak up in class. And some people have issues with being able to do that. They feel much more comfortable writing something on a piece of paper than verbally expressing their contribution. Other things that can really affect learning is providing snacks at the training. It helps people get re-energized when providing snacks, especially in the afternoon. Consider what types of snacks. This is very important. It's best to offer things such as nuts, yogurt, fruit, vegetables, those kind of things. And CJ mentioned earlier about brain-based learning. This is definitely touching base on that because, you know, people learning ability is affected by the things that they eat. For instance, if you provide foods high in sugar or carbs, the energy in the class may drop, and this makes it very difficult for people to learn. Now, thinking about attitude, and I think you've all heard about this, is that attitude is contagious. It can make all the difference in the attitude of the class. Your mood can feed the energy of that class. If you're upbeat and welcoming, the class will become more relaxed and ready to learn. Okay, down to number 2, making agreements. When beginning a class, it can be very helpful to have everyone talk about what is important to them and helpful to create that learning environment for them. If you do this by setting up some agreements, everyone feels much more relaxed and more likely to contribute to the class. All you have to do is say, okay, class, what do we need to make this training a better learning opportunity? What things would you need us as a class to do. Some of the common things are listed here. Now, this doesn't have to be very formal or make it very difficult. You can even actually add it to the agenda. So agreements are considered the same as ground rules. So let's look at an example of an agenda and agreements that, that makes it a little fun. This graphic is an agreement you'll see down at the bottom left-hand corner. Oops, we have a slide. Do we have that that next slide, CJ?
It's there. There's some clarification to questions, how we spread the, how you spread information and learn about our direction. Those were some agreements that they made.
Okay. This is actually an example that CJ provided. I think this is a really fun way and also can give a good start to the atmosphere of the training to have something like this because it's fun, but it also states those things that are important for a class, such as the agenda and the rules within that either training or meeting, and then the expectations or ground rules, so everybody knows the things that everyone needs in order to make that a very good environment for learning for them. Okay, let's talk about number 1. This is actually pretty important because we all learn as things happen. One thing we need to remember is that teaching is not done in a one-time effort. Anytime that you teach, you want to make sure that you're confirming the person gets the information, and then you also want to get feedback. So it's teach the information, watch to make sure that they understand the information, and then offer feedback to say, so, you know, how are things going? How did the class go? What are some ways that we can improve this teaching so that you know, we can offer that to people later on as a kind of a better teaching environment, better teaching materials, those kind of things, and then continue to repeat that. Just, I mean, that is constant improvement and also helps with you know, improving your techniques and the things that you need to know in order to improve things. So just remember that teaching does not end at the end of class. It's always continuously improving and enhancing and moving forward with making things better and to make you a better trainer. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to CJ.
Yeah, one of the big pieces is to be your best. And when we're focusing too on the ISP process, there are so many things when someone starts filling out the forms and talking with people and observing people that you as a trainer also should want feedback, because when people start getting into their jobs of as a manager, if you're teaching them to help their direct support staff fill out a PFW, or that they're writing action plans, were there things once they had done those tasks that they can also give you feedback on to help with the training in the future? So I think evaluating your own techniques and using the other staff to help improve it. So thinking about what worked and what didn't work when you were in the training, those things. So using those, we loved when those 10-minute activities, when we had to write down the PFW answers to the questions and then give each other feedback. That was really helpful. So when I went to my direct support staff, that I was able to give them that. Or maybe it's going to be what didn't work is we didn't get into how is that issue on that action plan getting to that depth that we need to really be able to understand why does that person really want that desired outcome, and we need to focus more on going through those action plans. So evaluating your own techniques is going to be helpful to then the next person that you're going to be training, that it's going to get a little bit better. There's also another tool that you can use, which some people know, is the 4+1 question. So this guides and really helps so that you don't keep doing the same thing over and over again that might not be working, but also that when you are doing something that is working, that you continue doing it. So it's a really good way to continue doing good things and start modifying those things that maybe need to change. So the 4 questions are, what have you tried? And you want it to be a question. So what have you tried to teach employees the ISP process? What have you learned? What are you pleased about? And what are you concerned about? And after you've answered these 4 questions, you want to ask the team, what is next? And then that creates some action to say, how are you going to then take that information and keep the things that worked going and start modifying or switching up the things that weren't working so well. And this is a little graphic because it doesn't have, if you've seen us do this in training, we do it on flip chart paper on the wall. And it really doesn't have to be that elaborate. It can be on a piece of paper with the simple questions right there. And then you've also then got it written down and can use that very effectively to make the changes to your training and also continue doing the things that are working well. So some of the resources, the Learning Brain by Eric Jensen, can be really helpful. There are 200 ways that people are smart, and he really is very helpful of understanding that, and it's written in, even though it's based all on research, it is written in a way that the average person can understand. Also, I gave some information here about David Kolb. It is extensive reading, but really can be a different way to look at learning styles outside of the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic piece. In addition, I had mentioned that at our website, we've got all of those different training resources. And please also always feel free to contact us with anything. If you've used one of those resources and you have feedback for us, we are always would love to know whether it worked for you, what didn't work for you, or are there things that you would like to see that we haven't produced as well. Really would like to be helpful. There's also, I put the learning community. There is a lot of different reading on different learning styles as well as examples to use that might be very relevant towards your work as well as planning. So we should have some time for questions now. Are there any questions? Well, if there are no questions, then I'd love to have you answer the final poll questions, as well as I want to let you know that July 9th, and we have a different time at 2 p.m. for our next forum, which is action planning for long-term goals within annual planning process. So we're going to focus on things that extend beyond 1 year. Thank you very much.
So we'll launch the last 2 poll questions. The first that we'd like you to answer is, how clear and easy to understand were the presenters today? Alrighty, and our very last poll question. Overall, how satisfied are you with today's forum? Give you just a moment to get your votes in on that. Great. Thank you very much. So just a quick reminder that this webinar has been recorded, and we will post it online by tomorrow at www.otac.org/ISP/forum for you to watch or share with others. And on behalf of the ISP and Person-Centered Practices team at OTAC, I want to say thank you and have a great day. Well, goodbye, everybody.